Hello, and thanks for joining us on this edition of the Niger Delta Dialogue. I am Stella Dogu. The Niger Delta Dialogue, a group driving discussion on development and peace in the Niger Delta region, started in 2016 as a one-off meeting of about 50 Niger Delta leaders who met to discuss the spate of militant attacks. Over time, the Niger Delta Dialogue evolved as a safe space for sustained discussion of issues on the Niger Delta region. On today's edition of the program, we'll be presenting the findings of the study conducted in Bayelsa State, where Nigeria first struck crude oil in commercial quantity in Oloibri in present-day Ogbia local government area. We have in the studio Honorable Fred Agbedi. He's an educationist, a ranking member of the Nigeria Federal House of Representatives, representing Sagbama Ekremo Federal Constituency of Bayelsa State. Before we engage the issues, let's watch the brief research on insecurity in Bayelsa State.
Bayelsa, with a landmass of approximately 9,059 square kilometers, is today the last state to have been created in Nigeria's oil-rich Niger Delta region. Carved out of Rivers State on October 1, 1996, Bayelsa State is the home of Nigeria's first oil wells, in which crude oil was in 1956 discovered in commercial quantity in Otogbage community of Oloibiri district in present-day Ogbia local government area. Today, Bayelsa State still has the record of producing 40% of the onshore crude oil in Nigeria and is the state with the largest gas reservoir in the country of about 18 trillion cubic feet. Bayelsa has 8 local government areas, namely Braz, Ekeremo, Kolokuma Opokuma, Nembe, Ogbia, Sagbama, Southern Ijaw, and Yenagwa. Instructively, there are oil-producing communities scattered across all the local government areas except in Kolokuma Opokuma, where crude oil is not being produced at the moment. Kolokuma Opokuma local government area covers a landmass of about 361 square kilometers, with much of the area occupied by the Bayelsa National Forest Reserve. Local governments in Bayelsa State are so important to its foundation, such that the name Bayelsa is an acronym of the 3 councils of Braz, Yenagwa, and Sagbama in the then Rivers State that were carved to create the state in 1996. Bayelsa State, with a population of over 1.7 million, has one of the most difficult terrains in the Niger Delta region, as many of its communities, including those in the state capital, Yenagwa, are almost completely surrounded by water, making them inaccessible by road. This is where Togbo Coronation Seyeta of the Center for Strategic Research, National Defense College, led the research by the Niger Delta Dialogue on Insecurity, and he shares with us his experience of undertaking the study in the state, also known as the glory of all lands.
We have to categorize the insecurity issues based on the various timelines we have experienced insecurity from, let's say, the year 2000 down to the current moment. Between 2001 to 2009, the insecurity issue that characterized the entire Niger Delta was militancy, the armed struggle, which was occasioned by issues of neglect, issues of marginalization and deprivation from the oil industry, led to the militancy that lasted about 9 years or thereabout. Now, post-amnesty, we had some relative peace until in 2016 when the Avengers came up and started blowing up pipelines. And that too was a very huge problem for the country because the country largely depends on crude oil, the proceeds from crude oil. Crude oil produces about 75 to 85% of our foreign exchange, and therefore anything that interrupts the production also affects the whole national economy. And so it is for that reason that the Niger Delta Dialogue came into the scene, working with the Office of the Vice President to see how the issue of the Niger Delta Ventures could be addressed. And then that matter was solved in 2016. The security situation is still precarious. Every state in the Niger Delta have their peculiar and context-specific insecurity issues. Coming to Bayelsa State, for instance, you have issues of cultism, you have issues of kidnapping, sea piracy, artisanal refining and oil theft, and so many other insecurity issues that have bedeviled the state.
Bayelsa is in the heart of the Niger Delta and remains the only state in the region that does not share common boundaries with states in any other geopolitical zone of the country. As a matter of fact, it shares boundaries with only Delta and Rivers State, and then the Atlantic Ocean in the Gulf of Guinea. These peculiarities on the geopolitical location of Bayelsa may explain why it has a legion of insecurity challenges, as captured in the findings of the research conducted in the state. The security challenges include militancy, cultism, sea piracy, communal disputes, kidnapping for ransom, and electoral violence, with victims cut across the different communities of the state.
Everywhere we went during the research, they spoke about issues of unemployment, issues of poverty, issues of non-involvement in the oil industry. The oil economy has taken over the traditional occupations of the people. There was supposed to be a migration of the people into the oil economy. But because of the technical nature of the oil economy and the fact that people in this area are not involved like other people from other regions that have come into the oil industry to take over the jobs.
It appears nothing threatens the future of Bayelsa State more than the proliferation of cult groups across the 8 local government areas where there is ongoing mass recruitment of young people in villages. These cult groups are growing stronger because their leaders are securing political positions and gradually having access to state power to influence governance and distribution of resources. This study concludes that this would trigger deadly violence in Bayelsa State in the not-too-distant future. It, however, makes recommendations that can address the issues raised in the report.
During election periods, you see thousands of youths are mobilized. Sometimes they are armed by politicians. After the election, the politicians do not necessarily have a way to, take these arms back from the youth. And sometimes the expectations of the youth are not met. And so they now resort to using the firearms that were acquired for them to, perpetrate certain criminal activities that will put food on their tables. During our focus group discussions and key informant interviews, we got to understand that these boys are motivated by the fact that the more you perform very criminal activities, the more you are promoted in the confraternity. For instance, if you kill, they promote you to higher ranks. And so they have this proclivity and the penchant to want to commit serious atrocities that could make them gain higher ranks within the confraternities. And so cultism and cult-related violence is very pervasive, and it is very common across every strata of the Bayelsa State and the local government areas.
The study on insecurity in Bayelsa State has been specific on its findings in each of the 8 local government areas, with roles defined for state, non-state, and community-based actors in findings in providing solutions that will address the identified challenges. Perhaps identifying the root causes of the drivers of violence and conflict in Bayelsa State, which undoubtedly will conclude poverty, illiteracy, and bad governance, or the lack of people-centered governance may also be a pathway in securing the future of the state.
Welcome back. The research on insecurity in Bayelsa State notes that communities across the 8 local government areas of the state have experienced different levels of insecurity. The causes of the insecurity have been linked to militancy, cultism, sea piracy, communal disputes, kidnapping for ransom, and electoral violence. The study recommends a multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral approach to address the issues, with specific actions to be taken by the state and non-state actors. Again with me in the studio is Honorable Fred Agbedi. He's from Bayelsa State, representing Sagbama Ekeremo Federal Constituency. You're welcome to the studio, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Good day, viewers.
You have read the report.
Yeah.
And I believe that what the report suggests, or the findings, is nothing new to you.
Not at all.
Because you are one of the gurus of politics and of governance. How else can I describe who you have been in Bayelsa State? What was your take when you read the findings of the report?
Yeah, as a research student myself, and as someone who was born and bred in the Niger Delta environment, particularly Bayelsa, the issues, that sum up as the findings of the research are the issues that are predominant today in Bayelsa as well as in the Niger Delta. Of course, we all know that something precipitated this.
Yes.
It's not as if this was what we were as a people, as a state. But over time, issues of neglect, issues of deprivation, issues that are environmental, in terms of devastation of environment by the oil prospecting companies, unemployment, poverty, a number of things like is identified in the research, summed up to creating the situation we find ourselves today in Bayelsa State. And I think that the researchers have done quite a good work. No research totally captures all the issues.
No.
There may be quite a few other issues that can be brought in the course of this discussion, which is normal in every research work. And I think I commend those who took up this research. I think that is going to pilot a number of affairs, particularly in identifying and then also profiling solutions, like you said before, both in governance, multi-sectoral approach, and all that, to see that we were able to redeem the situation in Bayelsa
so
State.
that you can resonate well with the findings of this study.
Yeah.
As a Bayelsan yourself, and somebody who has lived through this process, what are the things that you think that we can do, that Bayelsans can do, to mitigate some of these insecurity threats or drivers to insecurity?
Yeah, of course, as a people and as a state, in our communities, the communities have taken quite a number of steps. If you go to most of our communities, you have vigilantes that are put together by community. You have youths who take up certain responsibilities, particularly when issues of piracy, issues of kidnapping, robbery, cultism, when they help, there's a way that the communities put themselves together, to mitigate, those challenges. And that's as much as the effort that communities could go. The next level maybe is to also report to government, identifying certain characters that are dominantly players, actors, in this
Environment.
whole issue of insecurity, and then report to government. Sometimes government acts, promptly. Sometimes government is slow to action. But of course, when sometimes government reaction comes, the same people who try to mitigate suffers reprisal actions. And that is where you see military incursion in various communities, which for a number of times members in the National Assembly has raised motions to call attention of federal government to, because when you go back to our communities, the law-abiding citizens are suffering in the hands of lawbreakers. And if the legitimate Nigerian security also goes to create hardship, also goes to attack the communities, most of the people who suffer are the innocent people. And that is the point most of the time as parliamentarians we have always raised in the chambers, to call the attention of federal government to say, when the Nigerian security agencies go back on reprisal attacks, those who perpetuated the acts are no longer there, security agencies. So somehow we are suffering from both sides of the
double jeopardy.
Double jeopardy, and government needs to take a closer look. And that's why sometimes we say that we have very intelligent, capable, well-trained security agencies that can investigate and target those who committed this offense, rather than a random, aggression that the innocent people suffer more from.
Let's now go to specifics. One of the things that have really fueled insecurity, especially in Bayelsa State, sea piracy in our eastern fronts and even in the western front. What is your take on that?
Yeah, well, I think that taking the issue of fueling insecurity is largely fueled in Bayelsa by poverty. That is the basic that fuel insecurity. Because if the people have nothing to do, they are hungry, they are deprived, they feel they are suppressed and oppressed, then you can see reaction. And it's that reaction that brews insecurity. When you have that army of dissatisfied, unemployed people, it brews insecurity. Any mind that is gainfully employed will not have time for irrelevant things.
I want to engage you on another issue, and that is the role of the oil prospectors. You've talked about the degradation of the environment. I remember the first time that I went to Brass and I saw where the multinationals were staying and also saw where the natives were staying. It was night and day.
And I saw, yeah.
And I saw. And then we also know, the findings tell us, we also know that these people cannot see that kind of disparity and keep quiet. What should the role of government be? 60 years and counting, and we're still where we were. We're still where we were. What, in your opinion, should government do?
I can tell you categorically that government will not do anything to change the situation.
Why not?
If for any reason they will do anything, it is window dressing. The reason is simple. The oil industry that this entire country relies on is a business owned by the federal government. You cannot protect your people when you are the owner of the business. The federal government owns 60% of this business.
Is that the reason why
That is the reason.
the report says that they stoke all of these insecurities, they do divide and rule, all of those?
That is the reason. So even when the operators of these fields, the IOCs, even suggest to federal government to do this, if the federal government don't approve, they will not. Because the federal government spends 60% of that money.
In the development of the whole of Nigeria.
That is why the federal government, is not protecting the people because of their business. A business they have 60% interest in.
What about the state government?
The state
and
has
its
no
people?
The state has no stake. The state has no stake
But the
in
state,
the business.
the state government,
60% is federal government. The other 40% goes to the operators, and then from that point they settle their issues. The state government only shares from derivation. And it is the derivation money that is used to develop. And
Yes.
that is why the people are agitating that we want to be part of this business. So if we lose, if at the end of a financial year and a company is declaring dividends, if the company is declares loss account, yes, let's be part of it. If the company declares gains in terms of dividends, let's see what we can get.
Honorable, people who are listening to you now will understand that, will understand your line of argument.
Yeah.
But what is the responsibility of the state government towards its people?
The state government, and at any level of government, is to provide leadership and develop your state. Now, when you say responsibility, every government has responsibility at different levels. One problem that some of us have always shouted about is the fact that we are in a nation where we put money at a point, and then every state goes, collects a ration of it, and goes back, spends that money, and come. So when you allocate money to a state like that, they will tell you, these are our responsibilities we have expended this money on. But when a state takes our time to work out our own revenue and expend it, they will be more accountable to the people. They will be more accountable to the people. That is the issue. Because, and that's what we keep telling. See, the oil money is not there. The oil money is here.
So
this is where people get it. This is where people expend it. This is where that is the problem we have.
In the interim, when we are talking about multi-sectoral, federal, state, local government, what should we do in Bayelsa State to stem the incidents or the drivers of insecurity?
The state has done quite a number of things. Take, for example, they had a joint security formation in previous administrations. I don't know whether that is still going on, where the states also contributed money. All states in the Niger, including Bayelsa, contributed money to ensure that they provide security implements, pay security men to police the state. As we speak, there is still some money left in that account. Nobody knows what has happened to that. The state government has established some security formations. Take, for example, you had Doakpo in the last administration. It was used to deal promptly with security issues of insecurity, including cultism, robbery, kidnapping, and all that.
Are they making any inroads in those areas?
You see, a Nigerian problem is when you get too used to an environment, it's like you have also become an indigene. They are doing their best, but is it enough?
Definitely
Look at the
not.
other dimension. Most of the people who are there are people who don't come from the area. So they don't also understand the way the movements of the people from the area.
You're talking about the police?
Yes, the police, the army, you know, and all that. You see, and that is why most of the times we have said, get a state police. Get police at the local level so that these people will directly address. These are people they know. These are people they know in one way or the other. And when the criminal knows that somebody he knows is watching over him, has the hand of government to deal with him, he will be a lot more cautious. But you cannot deal with the issue of insecurity, no matter how many security structures you put on ground, without employment.
That is very true.
When poverty is ravaging.
Very, very true.
So if we must deal with the issues of insecurity, the first port of birth is ensuring that we deal with the issue of poverty, we deal with issue of unemployment. Once these two are handled, and then you ram it up with development. If you have a street that is completely dark, then it can harbor criminals. But if you have a street that is lit up from beginning to the end, then criminals will not
be able to operate, at least as freely as they used to.
So you deal with issue of poverty, you deal with issue of employment and then development.
Governance and employment.
Development.
Thank you again very much, Honorable Fred Agbedi, for coming to share your insights on the research findings. We hope that the research will not be on the shelves and that the government, all of the different stakeholders, will look to borrow some things to mitigate the state of insecurity in Bayelsa State. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Join us in our next edition as we continue with the Niger Delta Dialogue to seek evidence-based solutions to the challenges confronting the 6 core states of the region. I am Stella Dogu. Bye for now.